Good afternoon, everybody. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Pittsburgh Land Bank Board for Friday, May 10th. And let us begin with the roll call.
Reverend Burgess, Dr. Bay, Paul Legger,
Here.
Diamante Walker, Senator Fontana,
Here.
Councilwoman Gail Smith,
Here.
Councilman Lavelle,
Here.
Steve Mazza,
Here.
Wanda Wilson.
Here.
You have 6 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I want to announce that Rev and Dr. Bay are both absent today, so that's why I am taking this auspicious role. And on a less pleasant note, Irene's father died, and therefore she is not here today, although she would have been participating. I don't know what the funeral arrangements are or where they are, and if we know, we may want to let the board members know that just in case they want to know.
I can circulate that. I can also circulate flowers or a card or something on
Okay,
behalf of the
thank
board.
you. Next is public comment. Anybody wishing to address the board, you have 3 minutes to do that. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board? Second call, is there anyone who wishes to address the board for 3 minutes? Hearing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes of April. Is there a motion to approve the April minutes, which are included in your packet?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? No one is opposed. The April minutes are approved. The chairman's report.
That's you.
That's me. The one item that I have to bring to the board's attention is that the job description and the posting for hiring of an executive director were made yesterday by the URA. So it's on the URA website, I believe. And we did not use a paid headhunter, but we may have used some of the digital groups like Indeed or others that are major posting sites. But we did not spend money on a headhunter at this point, as we decided last meeting. That's the major.
And I'm glad that we posted it, and I'm going to say what I've said in public or private conversations, that I think that we should make a strong emphasis to make sure that we try to find somebody from the Pittsburgh region.
And that's a large part of the reason why we did not do it through a headhunter who would do national search. Next item is administrator's update. Bethany?
I'm getting there. Okay, that's me. Thank you. I have one update here for the administrator's report, and then obviously more throughout the meeting. One quick note is that last month this board authorized the executive committee to bind insurance providers so that this board an organization could be insured and could move forward without delay, move forward with its other day-to-day operations and activities. Because this board also has a procurement policy in place, which asks that we make significant effort, obviously, on on providing opportunities both for local firms as well as minority and women business-owned firms. You'll see in your packet the division of the 3 brokerages, which we did find. We had a minority brokered house, which there aren't many in the region, but they actually did not come through, so we had to sort of wait and reissue the RFQ once we found a new provider. So we do have the set, and we were able to identify an MWBE broker house, but that is the reason for the delay, and we will have that in front of this board for the June meeting.
Thank
and that's all for my report.
Next is the finance report, which Bethany will do in my stead.
Because you're chair this time.
No, just because you always do it.
Okay, thank you.
This will require 2 board actions, which I think we can take together.
Yes, so in your packet, you have actually a slightly different looking set of reports in front of you. The same set of information, the budget versus actual, the balance sheet, year-to-date expenditures and outstanding expenditures for approval. This is sort of a combination of what comes out of our accounting software and the sort of wrapped with a bow formatted version that had been provided. As the URA provides accounting services to the land bank, and they themselves are making some significant transitions in their finance department, the reports will start being generated wholly in-house from the finance department and will start looking more like the newer reports that you see in front of you. So that's just the reason for why they look different, and I think moving forward you'll start to see more of the new set of reports. Then
That
the
actually
last
gives
item-
us the opportunity to see the real ledgers as they are.
Correct.
And it
Yeah.
makes it easier for staff to deal with it because you simply print out what's on the system.
Exactly. Thank you. So there's less work on behalf of staff beyond the finance team, as well as you can see what the books themselves, you can see the direct printout from the books. So on that note, you have the standard reports in front of you if you have any questions on them. And then, of course, the last page is expenditures year to date and monthly expenditures for approval for your consideration.
Any questions about the finance report?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought to make two other notes. You'll see on the budget versus actual, which is the report you're used to seeing, versus the balance sheet, the numbers look a little different, and that's because the balance sheet is activity as of end of April, but the budget versus actual includes a few expenses that have accrued in May. That's the difference for those two numbers. And one thing that you're also not seeing is an accounts receivable report, which would identify the outstanding $100,000 remaining in the city of Pittsburgh's budgeted item for the city. It's still there. It hasn't gone away. It's just not reflected at this point in this report.
And it's my understanding that the CAFR was published on time on May 1st, and we are included in there as a supporting work.
We should be, yes.
Okay.
I haven't gone in myself to look.
All right, thank you. We need, did we do the April expenditures? We did, and the financial review. So I need a motion to approve the financial review and the April expenditures as one motion. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? No one is opposed. The motion passes. Inventory report. Ms. Davidson.
Did we talk about fundraising?
We did skip over that, didn't we? What about fundraising?
I don't have anything more at this point other than the continuation of the discussion at the April meeting, and that is where the board directed myself to work to set up a series of meetings, which just haven't taken place yet, with the Housing Opportunity Fund, to work with the elected officials on the board to identify in the city budget potential opportunities, and then to start setting up meetings with foundations. So those meetings are still being set up. Nothing has taken place yet.
And I'm going to reiterate again that I'd like to make sure that we put some strong emphasis on public dollars and fundraising independently of foundation and private companies, because I really don't think that our land, our water, our schools, everything should be controlled by foundation funding. I think it's great to have some of their support, and I think it's great to have some of their funding, but I don't think that it should be controlling everything in the city of Pittsburgh. People elect elected officials to run their government, not corporation, not foundations. So with that said, I'd like to make sure that we're doing something to attract dollars that that we raise independently.
And related to that comment, we're moving into June, which is budget development period. And so we need to make contact with the city budget office about funding for next year. Expenses have been actually very low this year, which is why this is not critical at this point,
So far.
so far.
Which
As
is why
we
we
move
don't
into
have
an
staff,
inventory.
because it's also so
Yeah.
works twofold.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry.
The other piece is, yes, expenses have been low. As we move into owning property, that's where the majority of expenses will start to accrue as you move into the second half of this year. And we've already started conversations with the Office of Management and Budget, so they know sort of that we're out there, but that's just been a staff-to-staff conversation. I think taking that conversation to the next level would be the next step.
Anybody who works closely with the Housing Development Fund, have you talked among yourselves at all? As
Well,
what
I
is
think
going on
Reverend-
here?
Well, I'm on there. And Diamante.
I mentioned it quite a few times. I think that they're, in the allocation plan, I think that there's,
Are you on there?
have discussions. I think Reverend Burgess had said that he would, advance those discussions at some point in time. I don't know where we are, though.
Well, that's important because that's another source too, which is very possible,
It's a public
Yeah.
source.
and it
I
is a
think
public
I love
source.
that idea. And I mean, honestly, I think that we should really have some really meaningful conversation. I think that we turn to the foundations because they do want to be supportive, they do want to help, and so it's easier for us to do that than it is for us to think outside the box and to try to make sure that we keep public land in public control. So I think that we need to have those conversations.
Thank you. That leads us into the next item.
Inventory?
Yes.
Okay.
Public land in public control.
Perfect segue. Thank you.
I could go on if you want me to, but I'm trying to be nice. So,
You're being very nice.
No, and
it's killing me.
I will similarly echo that staff-to-staff conversations have started with the Housing Opportunity Fund, but not at the level of the board and advisory committees. So that would also be, I think, the next step.
Just one other point to that. The 2019 allocation was approved yesterday by the URA board. So it'll now be coming over to council, I believe, next week, and then up for us for discussion in 2 weeks. I do not believe there was an allocation in that allocation plan for this.
It's earmarked for demonstration dollars.
Oh, that's in the demonstration dollars?
One
I didn't realize
potential
that.
use
Okay.
could be demonstration dollars to help
didn't
build
realize that.
capacity
Okay.
in the land bank.
So
it
it's
was-
called demonstration, not land bank.
That's the
way they have
flexibility
to,
in the allocation plan. So if there was something that came to the table, it could be a crisis like we saw with Bethesda Homes, or it could be some opportunity for the land bank to do something around affordable housing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's 500,000 in that line item?
I believe so. I believe, yes. This gentleman knows, he was there.
He does know a lot. He also knows a lot about evictions, and I wish we'd talked to him a little bit more about
And I
evictions and
believe
how to
that, yeah,
avoid those.
so.
And I think some of it is the way the allocation plan or the legislation was written. I don't think we can call out specific entities in that allocation plan,
Yes.
so they put them in buckets, and then we are sort of an eligible recipient of certain buckets, like the demonstration dollars,
Potentially.
potentially. Inventory.
But if this board wants to talk to council, obviously 3 members are sitting here, we should do so in the next 2 weeks, 'cause it's gonna come up for discussion.
Good to know, thank you. And good to know on your side too, that
Yes,
that's
That's my
coming.
timeline. That's my timeline. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So transitioning to public land in public ownership is the inventory report, and there are 2 items to report. One is some members of this board were in attendance yesterday. Others may have seen or read that the URA approved its first transfer of property to the land bank, and that is 325 Jacunda. It is in the neighborhood of Knoxville. It is a single-family structure. So the 2 properties that are sort of first to be sort of signed on the dotted line will be a piece of vacant land and a single-family structure. The transfer hasn't taken place yet, so this is merely authorizing the land bank to acquire something. Of course, then once the land bank has acquired it, we are under obligation to manage and maintain it, as well as to then go through our disposition process. So we're just at this point acquiring something into our inventory. We're not talking about what it's going to be used for, who we're selling it to, for what dollar amount. Those are future conversations. So just wanted to bring that to this board's attention.
Is there a plan to maintain this or keep the grass, otherwise we're gonna hear it?
Sure. So at this, so I have the contract ready to be signed today, but we'll have Rev sign it on Monday. But at the April meeting, this board authorized entering into 2 separate contracts, temporary subcontracts with the URA. One is for an online data management system, which is a portal that both allows staff to track information about an inventory, but also communicate a certain set of that to the public. It is the same system that the city of Pittsburgh currently uses and the URA uses to sort of advertise and both front and back end manage its inventory from an information perspective. On the physical maintenance perspective, the second contract that was authorized was a subcontract on the URA's land care program, which engages property maintenance providers so that the moment the land bank owns a property, it gets channeled into what is essentially a bundle or a contract that already has a maintenance provider in place with a specific scope, and then we reimburse the URA for the services provided by this third party contractor.
Would that property be posted that it's owned by?
I don't think, there is no requirement that we physically put a sign on the property. However, there are several requirements in state legislation and local legislation and the local policies and procedures which say once we own something, we are obligated to make our portfolio information available to the general public, which is why that online database is so important, so that we can say, we own this, this is where it is, this is information about it.
The only place that folks can know is online. They can't walk up to the property and know that.
Per the existing legislation states that we have to make it available in paper format. So there's a book that, like sort of you come up to the real estate counter, you have to physically be able to read it, and it has to be available online. It doesn't have to be there's no existing policy that states we have to physically post it on the property.
In fact, Senator, no properties are posted, even those owned by the city, until they are up for sale. And when they're up for sale, then there are legal requirements about posting them, but otherwise, no, they're not. And I understand your concern.
I mean, when will this property be for sale then, I guess is.
Well, first of all, calling it our inventory is a little misleading in the sense that we don't own any of them. There are actually 3 properties, I believe. There was the initial one that was given over to us by council.
Authorized.
There are these 2, so that's 3 now.
This is one more. This is one from the URA, one from the city, that are going to be the first 2. So
there are
original
2
one, yeah.
properties in what we are calling our inventory, but we don't actually own them.
They're not in
yet.
our inventory. They're in the pipeline.
We don't actually own them. And how long does it take us? This is our experiment to find out how long it takes us to actually acquire the property. So far, it's taking too long, as far as I'm concerned.
So certainly, the pilot, this pilot year of activities is designed, is for specifically this purpose, to figure out what the processes need to be and where the sort of pain points or lag times are, so that we can be more efficient than we are the first time out the gate. The first time you do anything, it's, I would say, painful, but it takes a lot of time because you're starting from scratch or designing something, particularly when you're going government to government. That intersection we need to make sure meets both entities' legal requirements while building in whatever efficiencies we can. So I would say the goal is to get the processes right, or as right as possible, the first time. So once they can be replicated smoothly and quickly. And it has certainly been very protracted for this first couple. We do have a pipeline of 10 or 15 behind this that the board has seen different iterations over the last few months as well, mostly from the city. Again, we've identified properties also for the treasurer sales moving forward. We're working with community groups. And then the conversation around the property reserve, which is the other item in the inventory report today, around the property reserve and the future of the properties currently in this reserve, as well as the future programmatic and policy infrastructure, is also another piece of the, I think, initial pilot portfolio. So on that note, Wanda, I think, was appointed last month by Reverend Burgess to chair the Property Reserve Committee.
Yeah, sure. So what we had talked about was getting all the relevant parties around involved with the property reserve to a meeting to discuss the procedures that we need to put in place and how we want to make sure that we're preserving the things that are really successful about the property reserve system and figuring out how we can make any improvements to it. And we're going to be scheduling that in the next month, the next few weeks.
Before the end of May, I think.
Okay, all right, so
it would
next few
happen.
weeks.
So that meeting is not yet scheduled. I think all the board members would appreciate knowing when it is, where it is, so that if we want to attend, we can.
I have a question. So as we're talking about this pipeline, I know that we have an obligation to maintain any land that is within our portfolio. So I have two questions. One, are we still considering sort of leveraging the URA's land care contract to maintain these properties? And two, we've had questions from the public quite a few times about the disposition process and when applications will become available and how can the public engage with us. So I'd like to hear a little bit about where we're going with that. And we saw a draft application last month. Have we made any advancements on that?
Certainly. So I think there were 2 or 3 questions there.
Yeah.
One is on the land care property maintenance. Yes, we will very shortly be a subcontractor on that contract, at least through the end of this contract year, which provides us the opportunity to both support MWBE contractors and businesses in the area, as well as ensure that our properties are being adequately maintained from the moment we take ownership of them. And then think about long-term or midterm, even if we want to continue to participate in some kind of coordinated program. I think one of the larger conversations is how can not just the land bank, but all of the government agencies coordinate and be most effective and efficient with their dollars. And sometimes the housing authority owns a piece of land, the city owns a piece of land, the URA may own a piece of land, and then maybe the land bank, instead of sending 4 contractors out on 4 different dates. So there may be some future coordination, or this board may decide that they want to try something different, but that'll give us some time to think about that and see the mechanics of the existing program. And then on the disposition, was that
Disposition,
the disposition
the application
question?
being or expressing interest in a property.
Yes, thank you. So up until this point, we've mostly, Irene and myself have focused on acquisition by the land bank. So getting properties into the land bank, identifying them per the sort of strategic plan and criteria and characteristics that this board has identified, and creating a pipeline of and figuring out the processes for acquiring, while simultaneously setting the infrastructure for disposition. So even though since we don't own an inventory yet, we have a pipeline, but we don't own anything, so there's nothing we can sell yet, or there's nothing we can dispose of yet, we do have to make sure that those processes are in place so that when we own property, the public can interact with us and make their interest known. So yes, we provided a set of draft forms. They've been finalized. They are available right now upon request, simply because as we are transitioning our website over the next few weeks to a new website, we're not putting any significant new information, new forms, new complicated sort of content on the existing website. So these processes, these forms already do exist in final form. We did finalize them between the last last meeting and this meeting.
Okay.
We have started to receive requests from community-based organizations and a few requests from individuals. So you can go to the website. It does have that information that you can do this information, these forms are available upon request, but the best point of contact would be to go to staff to get the form if there's something you're interested in. Now, you can't apply for a property we don't own, but one of the things that this board also, in its policies and procedures laid out, is what's called a request for investigation, which means there may be a property that's in the private domain that you, public individual or entity, may be interested in, and you can submit a request to investigate, and the land bank can review, do its due diligence, and understand if the land bank has a potential role or acquisition path that it may assist you in that process. So just because we don't own anything doesn't mean we can't potentially interact with the public around an inventory or around a set of properties.
Okay.
We also received last month a request to receive a donation. So that's another way that we're, while the information is not on our website because we're in this sort of in-between period, we are in fact able to receive this information
I'd
and
like
start
to see us
interacting.
expedite and make that information as available to the public as quickly as possible, since it is starting to ramp up. The other thing that I would say, could you state the email address that these inquiries could come to, since it's not on the website right now?
Since the forms aren't on the website,
Yeah.
sure, yeah, and the email address and everything is, but it's staff@pghlandbank.org. So pghlandbank.org is the land bank's website. Staff@pghlandbank.org will get you basically to me, and then,
Okay.
and then I would respond.
All right, thank you.
So just for clarity, for my own clarity, if a community organization, if a CDC is interested in potentially having some properties come through the land bank, what should their first step be?
So
Or should they
at
not?
current, so this is part of the property reserve conversation. So there will be a new process defined, so I don't want to sort of, there's going to be sort of what currently exists, a transition period, and then a future forward once this board adopts a policy or program that it hasn't adopted yet. We're looking for recommendations to come out of the work of this committee. At current, they would contact staff, and we would sit down. They might provide a list. They would sit down. We might have a meeting, and then there's a series of criteria that this board has essentially outlined, and then a combination of Irene on the legal side and myself would conduct that due diligence to see if the property is eligible or available, through which path, and we would go from there.
Is the request for investigation on the website, or is that also send an email to staff at Land Bank?
Because these are sort of forms at this point, they're not up on the
Okay.
website.
Thank you.
And I'm asking because literally yesterday I was in a conversation with the Shinley Heights who told me they had
I was
just.
about to ask he's going to be emailing me tomorrow or Monday, hopefully.
I mean, they told me they had sent you an email saying, "Hey, we want these properties." I was like, well, I think it's a little more technical than just emailing Bethany and saying we want these properties. That's why I want to make sure I'm giving them the correct advice.
Except at this point, I don't think it is any more technical than that, because
Okay.
there's no form to do it or any other way.
Okay.
So let
They
them
can-
just do it that way.
Well, they had to I provided them a template of information that I needed, and they provided that information back. They may have a second
Okay.
set of properties, but I have actually,
Oh,
they did
okay.
provide a first set.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you keep us updated on those requests?
So there hasn't been any change since last month, and there was an update last month.
Okay.
But I
Just
can.
making sure.
It would be helpful to see sort of an inquiry pipeline or something
Yeah.
like that on a quarterly basis at minimum.
And what hopefully, as we all try and throughout this process to work smarter about this, is this data management system. This eProperty Plus has the ability to receive those inquiries online, so it's much easier to track and just sort of. Obviously, we're always going to get inquiries via email and over the phone and in very, like, even in person in different ways. But the more we can make these reports easy to create and then provide, I think the more real-time information we can get the board.
And this is not to create more work, but I am a fan of incrementalism, and I know that we're transitioning to an actual real system, but in the interest of transparency and just making sure that as we're meeting as a board, that the public is very clear about what's happening transactionally, I think we need to have a better way to wrap our heads and our hands around that. So I would encourage us to just, at these monthly meetings, be able to unpack and have a real understanding about, because if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm interested, I want to be able to very fluently say, this is what you need to do. And I know that we're getting our legs, so that's becoming more critically important.
Certainly. I think it would be helpful for staff, and some of this may come out of the work of the Property Reserve Committee, but also if there are a couple board members that are particularly interested that could sit down to say, these are the types of information we're interested in or may be helpful at this point. That way, I'm not making something that doesn't meet your needs.
Right. Then
Are
that'd be
there any
helpful.
other questions, comments on these items? I would like to see next meeting a discussion of what the process is for taking a property and actually acquiring it, and where we are in that process with these two, so that we start to get a sense of how long this takes. I think we all remember that the purpose of the land bank is to shorten that horrible process that the city has that can last 18 to 24 months normally, and maybe longer. And if we're not doing that, then we need to do something to kick that up and make
So I
it as
think
short
by
as
state
possible.
law, it's only shortened by 4 months is what, the last time we looked into it.
In the tax foreclosure process, that would be, I think, one of the areas. But in the sort of transfer process between agencies or other acquisition, there are a number of other acquisition methods where, like the URA city transfer process is very lengthy. And is there a way that we can build
So
efficiencies?
what I remember when we were questioning, when Reverend Burgess, Daniel, myself, Darlene were questioning the land bank, one of the things we found out was that the land bank process didn't speed up the process at all, other than by 4 months, possibly. So that's
Well,
what I'm
maybe
referring
we need to look at what the procedures are to see if there's a way to make that work better. And if it requires change in
Here we are
either
all sitting.
city code or maybe even state law, God forbid,
I think I'm sorry.
we would have to do what we have to do to speed things up.
We have
and
good
luckily we
partners.
have
We have
Senator-
good partners on the state level, thank you.
So, and if, I think there was some, also, as you specifically, Director Legger, asked about acquisition, the process for acquisition and where we are in it, and there are some efficiencies, maybe not many, that can be built into acquisition. There's also been an acknowledgement, I think, in this process that the URA's disposition process is about 24 months and very geared and appropriate towards large-scale projects. And then the city's disposition process is sort of on the other side of the spectrum. Can we find a middle ground for disposition as well, where it's not as long as the URA and also guarantees some successful outcomes and maybe has some different levels of oversight or ability to sort of distinguish between different end uses than the city does. So it's on both sides, the acquisition side and the disposition side.
All right. Thank you. Next is the Communications Committee. Ms. Walker?
Okay, so
It's probably her and Dr. Bay by themselves.
It's her by herself today, I can assure you of that.
I'm supposed to be on, but I never show.
As Bethany said, our website is underway, and we are sort of in a state of flux with respect to getting forms, eProperties Plus integrated into that. It's being ramped up. I think that I'm hoping that by the next board meeting that we should at least have proof of concept available.
It should be live by the next board meeting,
Okay.
if not
All right.
sooner. We were trying to get it done in the next week, but it might take a couple extra.
All right. And so the other item that we want to talk about today is the request for public comment at the end of our board meetings. I believe it came up twice within the last two that we've had in March and in April. So we asked Irene Clark to give us some baseline recommendations about how this could be done. So in your board packet, there is an outline of what those recommendations are. I'm presenting it today for consideration. I think the intent is to maybe put it up for vote at the next board meeting, but the concept is really to allow possibly 3 minutes at the end of our board meeting for the public to respond to what we voted on and for the board to listen to that, and should we have questions or feedback, direct those items to staff to follow up on.
So we have it at the end of the meeting instead of the beginning?
At the beginning and the end.
Both.
One of the things that this would require is a change in the bylaws, because the bylaws describe
supportive of
exactly
both.
how the meeting is supposed to go. And so we'd have to add public comment at the end of that list that's in the bylaws. This seems silly to me, but this is the way
Yeah.
that things go legally.
I'm not supportive of it being both, but I think that we need to do our due diligence in making sure people are aware of the agenda so they know what we are voting on ahead of time, like we do for city council. We, post it ahead of time and.
And there are strict requirements around it. So if you look in the packet, it's very prescriptive as to what can be spoken about, how long.
Yeah.
It's available today.
No, my concern is what happens when we have something that is of interest to the broader community, and then if we get 100 speakers, they want to speak at the beginning and at the end. That's so.
I think that should be limited. That
Yeah.
thing, maybe different
That's-
topics.
yeah.
Rather than say that like one person can only talk once, you want to, maybe they can talk twice, but it's a different topic.
There's a list of recommendations in
The
your
recommendation
about how it
essentially
should
caps
go.
that. Yeah, the
So you can take a
recommendation will
look at
cap
those
it.
and be ready to talk about them at the next meeting.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
state law
Thank you for your
does
work on this.
require that we have comment at the beginning of the meeting.
I actually
under
think
the
I like it
sunshine
at the
law.
beginning because then I get to hear what they have to say. And by the end of the meeting, I'm like, oh my God, we're all tired. It's like we don't want to hear each other talk, let alone somebody else sometimes. So
I'll take
I
you
hate
to a
say
water
it.
board meeting, you want to get tired.
At the end of the meeting, I think it's gonna cause a little bit of issues too. People go off the rail. It's so easy to just get up there and discuss what they want to discuss, even though there's a set of rules. It's easy for us to say, okay, you're done, but that's the hard part, controlling that piece of it.
I don't
That's
disagree
where
with
that
that.
sergeant at arms at the end there comes in handy.
I know he's over there.
People
Thankfully, we
would
don't
be
usually need them.
still
Could make the
constrained to
sergeant
3
at arms
minutes.
the timer.
It's 3 minutes, and you can roll them out of order and that sort of thing, but you're right, it can go off the rails, it's hard, and then they want to engage the board, you can't have the board engaging either, so that's
Right.
you can't do that, so it can't be personal, and it can't be legal, you know.
It'd be nice if we had an opportunity for people to engage the board like more frequently, you know what I mean, like in a, where they can actually have conversations. Because I learn a lot from the audience. I mean, I really do sometimes, you know.
I'll be honest with you. I like public comment at the beginning, and I would like to see the board host more public hearings, like
Yeah.
post-agenda meetings, so the public could talk to us maybe once or twice a year and do it that way
Yeah.
instead of trying to append. Because if we really can't respond, I mean, I'm trying to understand the real value of commenting
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
But we asked Irene to do the due diligence. She's done it, and I want to share it with you so that you can look at it. But to your point, I think if the agendas go out in enough time and people have time to absorb the information, they can give public comment at the beginning before we vote, and that's really where it has its best impact.
And do we hand out the agenda here?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
is
what
it-
I was
is it
going to
here?
ask. Could we actually have a briefing on what is the procedure for putting the agenda out to the public? Was this agenda today posted publicly, and where and at what time frame?
So it is posted online, and much similar to the URAs, it has to go out at least it goes out at least 2 days before the board meeting on the Land Bank's website. It's a PDF, so we just upload that little form itself. And then the minutes go up once the board has approved the next month's minutes. They are brought here. It isn't posted publicly anywhere. I have been trying to figure out what the best avenue of physically posting the agenda, like, do we post, because I know city councils go downstairs, like they get pinned to the board, the URAs get pinned to certain boards, so we don't physically post them. That could be another area. We can have Irene go through and provide sort of what is stated requirements and what the procedure, and match that with the current procedure to see what other opportunities there are.
We also don't have them available on the table next to the podium like you do for other meetings that occur. Are they there? Okay. I didn't know that. So I think a lot of people might not have known it either. Good.
I would say that 2 days doesn't seem as much time as,
Mention those during public
you know,
comment.
I mean, I don't know if that's what everybody is comfortable with. I think a few more days for the public to know what's on the agenda would be helpful to supporting that public comment that comes at the beginning of the meeting.
Agreed.
And I think
That may be why
PDF
they're
file is
asking
difficult.
for
I mean-
public comment at the end, because it's too much to absorb the information when there's not a timeliness to how the information is distributed.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
I'm-
really think the agenda should be, if not a week in advance, at least 3 or 4 days, as opposed to just 2 days.
I
Is there a
would
reason
agree.
we
I think
do
the
it in a
law
PDF
says 2
file
days
instead of just
at
posting?
minimum.
'Cause, I mean, it's just one
But as a
sheet.
courtesy,
We could do better than what the minimum law
Always.
requirements is. So.
always.
Maybe
Was there
you
a
would want to give some consideration to the next meeting to
Yeah.
proposing a number of days that we would post in advance. I don't want to do it today because we would be all over the place. But if we think about it and maybe get it in order for next meeting, that's a good idea. Councilwoman, do you have something?
No, I'm going to wait till the next meeting.
Okay.
I can follow directions sometimes.
You're better than I am. Okay, so there is no action related to the public comment at this meeting. We will do that at the next meeting. But please read what is in your packet as the recommendations from Ms. Clark, our solicitor. New business, is there any legislative update, Senator, that you would wish to comment on? No. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.